as we begin, what's most alive for you in your work recently?
What's really alive for me? I think that when there are people who are on opposite sides of an identity-based conflict who just cannot at all imagine being even in the presence of somebody who differs from them, much less having a constructive conversation or working toward a common goal. When they do that, and they are present with each other and they have that conversation and they discover that they can do it, and that not only can they do that, they can do a lot more.
Mhm.
To illustrate that, I'll tell you about a project that I'm involved in with people on the firearms issue. And this is through one of my affiliations at Essential Partners, a panel of 23 activists and advocates on the issue of firearms from the far right to the far left and in between were gathered together by the Tufts School of Public Health to see if they could agree on a few core policies that would enhance safety around firearms. And in the beginning, very few people really believed that that was going to be possible. Um, and yet, by starting with dialogue and having people encounter each other as people, it set the foundation for them to have a conversation, many more conversations over the space of a year about policies that could be created.
Mhm.
And the initial charge was to come up with three. They come up with eight, 67 pages worth of policies that they're now bringing out to the world.
Mhm.
Um,
Can you take me into a moment when the group first came together, or when you could feel that the group was really divided, where it mattered?
there were plenty of those moments, all the way through. They're very firmly committed to Second Amendment rights, who are deeply concerned about government overreach in creating rules and regulations that restrict their freedom. And there are people who are deeply committed to enhancing the safety because they have been involved either as uh, directly involved or involved as an advocate for families that have experienced loss of children in school shootings.
Mhm.
So those perspectives um, are very powerful and very strong.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and people hold them and they bring them together and they learn to really respect where other people are coming from because
Mhm.
they learned about that process of where they're coming from.
Could you come up with a case that you could describe what was happening?
Sure. So it was a long time ago. Um, Laura Chazen and I were asked to see if it was possible to convene an off-the-record conversation of people in the Episcopal Church in Massachusetts about homosexuals being ordained to the priesthood. That was an issue at that time. And so we worked with a small planning group, which comprised two national leaders on both sides of the issue, very conservative theological, very progressive theological, as far apart as the East is from the West. And at the end of one planning meeting, during which there were tears, um, one person turned to another and said, I hate the way you think, but I love you. And it wasn't bullshit.
Oh,
It was real, it was true. And Laura and I, as we were walking out the door, we both also were involved in the Episcopal Church, so we had the Christian framework. One of us turned to the other, I can't really remember who it was, and we said, wow, the Holy Spirit was really evident here. These men opened themselves to the movement of the Spirit today. Uh,
wow.
and that formed the foundation for that project, which went on for a year, where people again did not think that they could find any common ground. They wound up creating a workbook that was distributed to all parishes in the Diocese of Massachusetts. And then that became the foundation for 3 years of working with archbishops from around the Anglican Communion in secret about this
Mhm.
issue.
Mhm.
So all that was just really inspiring and motivated me to do more.
What was happening in the room before the tears emerged?
Yeah, I was sort of like, the sort of classic reflective structured dialogue going back to the foundation of the Public Conversations Project. Um, after 2 years of grounded theory research, they found out that asking people about their experience and how their experience affects their perspective was key. And in this case, it was the same. We had asked these, there happened to be two men, about their personal experience, and they had never shared this before
Mm.
with each other or in public. And they found that they had both suffered. And this is so often the case when we bring people together. People learn about the suffering of other people. They learn a lot more, but they learn about the suffering. And people turn to each other and say, I didn't live your life, but I know what it's like to suffer. Um, and I feel for you. And likewise. And that then begins to form a foundation for a whole other kind of relationship. Doesn't take long. Um, but if you ask the right question and you create the right context and people are prepared, it can really be transformative.
Mm. Very moving.
Yeah, it was, and it still is a long time afterwards.
Wow. And what was going on inside you? Do you recall when this happened, when this guy emerged in tears and the other person said, I hate you, what you said, but I love you.
Well, I felt like I was being graced with being in the presence of God, honestly, to not to put too fine a point on it, but to feel like something is going on here that's beyond what can be counted on just by looking at one and the other. There's something more in this room, and I could feel that sense of something transcendent was happening. And I think that oftentimes when my experience is when people really engage in dialogue, the way that I talk about it, again, I'm coming from a spiritual perspective, is they become more permeable to the spirit. They become more permeable to each other and to whatever that thing is that we call spirit, that enervate that brings life to all of us. And we certainly felt it in that room.
Do you have another example when you saw that people were permeable to the spirit?
Yeah. Um, for the last 3 years, I guess it's about 3 years, I've been doing conversations about Israel and Palestine in corporate and nonprofit settings, as well as in specifically Jewish communities. Um, and there have been times when people have, if I ask that sort of experience question, um, when, people have very deep and profound, passionate perspectives that are rooted in completely opposite experiences. But again, they may be suffering experiences. So my sister was killed by Palestinian terrorists. My brother was killed in front of me by an IDF soldier. Um, when those perspectives are in the room and people can sit there and allow that to be present and allow the person to be present and allow their experience to be heard, that's when you start to get the feeling that something greater is happening here, that is
Mhm.
carrying this conversation, that goes beyond the skills of the facilitator or the design or the people in the room or whatever. And, I mean, that might not be true, but that's how it feels.
I'm sorry, what is it that may not be
The,
true?
the, the fact that there might be something else
Oh,
that's
oh, oh, I
guiding this
see. Yes,
conversation along.
I understand. Yeah. So when one person said this and one person said that, what did you actually do in that moment?
Well, I find that uh, there are a lot of times when I feel like the biggest thing I can do is restrain myself.
Mm.
Somebody asked me yesterday, a client actually, what are the most important qualities for a facilitator in doing this work? I said, well, I usually somewhat laughingly tell people, can you love people? Can you keep your mouth shut? And it's the restraining my own wanting to join with whatever the feeling is that I often want to weep with those who weep, right? If I hear, like I was doing dialogues with healthcare workers during COVID, who I'm going to get choked up just talking about this, who are, stacking dead bodies in the hallways of their healthcare facility. And I just wanted to weep. I wanted to just join them in their pain. Um, so that's, what's happening for me is usually really trying to understand what's happening within me, what may be triggered in a negative way in me, and also what may be triggered in a positive way that is not going to serve the group. So empathy is a good thing, right? But me bawling my eyes out in front of everybody isn't going to help anybody but me,
Mm.
right?
May I ask you, what is the emotion that you got choked up just now? What was that about?
Again, the sadness, of people talking about being with people as they were dying and holding the phone up so that they could see their children, and to the weeping and the agony, and the frustration and the helplessness, were all present and just wrenching all of our hearts, including the facilitators.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think there might be something also about witnessing other people's pain.
Yes. And it's really important. I think that's one of the things that we do in this work, I think, is we provide a witness, and particularly if we do our preparatory work really well, we provide a really good witness before people come into a room together. But we're also creating the environment within which people can witness each other and be
Mm.
witnessed, right? Without being shamed, without being triggered, without, responding in negative ways. And that component of witnessing, I'm glad you brought that word up, but I think it's really, really important for people to have that experience, especially when they've suffered. I think most people want to be seen. They want to be seen for who they experience themselves to be. And that's the component right there, to give people that experience of being seen, without being judged, without being
Yes.
content with, right? And you do that as a coach, and we can create that environment in the group as well so that people can do that for each other. You're providing a compassionate witness of caring, that they feel cared for. Yeah.
So can we go back to these dialogues you were facilitating on Israel-Palestine? And how did the can you take me into a moment where there was sort of a clash either of opinions or perspectives? And was there a moment when something shifted?
Yeah, there are so many moments, when things shift. Um, and I think that if I were to sort of string them together, it would be an example of it would be, um, I understand why you feel the way you do. I feel differently than you do, but I understand why you feel the way you do. Can you tell me more? And when people can shift to getting curious, in spite of the fact that they so deeply differ, and they can be genuinely interested in the experience of another, um, that's really where I see the shift happening. And once people feel seen by that compassionate presence in the other people in the group, it really makes that possible, that people can do that. But I want to add something to that, to the being seen piece. Um, so I mentioned the COVID dialogues. And in the COVID dialogues, we specifically did not start with an invitation to talk about trauma and pain. We actually started with an invitation to talk about resource. And can you tell us about someone in your life who's given you the strength to endure what you've endured and to be able to give to others? Um, and so that's where they started, and they were seen as resilient and resourceful people first, before they talked about their wound. So I want to make sure we don't leave that out, in terms of the sense of what we hope people will see in each other, and then that too starts to shift how people view each other, in terms of seeing one another as sources of wisdom and resource, etc., even across divides.
How does real resilience set the stage for me being willing to hear you and hear your suffering?
So 95, it was the sort of the shootings at the abortion clinics in Boston happened in late 94, and then in 95 the Public Conversations Project reached out to 6 abortion leaders and had, secret dialogues for 6 years. But before that, Laura Chazen did an evening at the First Church in Cambridge. It was February 1995, and there were police everywhere guarding the doors because it was an evening to talk about abortion. And I had just been hired. I was a new recruit, and I'd never been in a dialogue before. And she did a presentation that night where she had us turn to a neighbor and use the format to talk about abortion. I had never had a constructive conversation about abortion in my entire life until that night. And in 2 minutes, back and forth, was the first time. And it was because of the prompt and because of the atmosphere that was created. And the way that that affected me, in addition to affecting how I saw the other person, was holy crap, I could do this. I'm capable. I actually can get curious about somebody who is 180 degrees different from me. And it's because they got curious about me and they
Yeah.
saw me and they didn't criticize me. And that
Mm.
was like, I'm in, man. Yeah. So I think it's people discover that they have capacity that they never imagined they had. If you There's a trailer for the Guns Project. They're making a documentary about it. And one of the things that a couple of the guys say is, when we came together, there's no way we thought we would be able to be in the same room together and be constructive with each other. And yet, because they saw, where people had come from and were seen as competent and resourceful people, they were able to go there.
Mm. Do you by any chance remember the prompt in the abortion discussion?
Oh yeah, it was a classic thing. Tell us how your personal experience affects your perspective on abortion.
Yeah.
And then it's that, and then what is at the heart of the matter for you, and where do you feel pulled in different directions? Still use that format today.
What did you do at the moment when you saw people kind of disagreeing?
Um, so generally, I try to do nothing in those moments because that's part of the deal. It's to allow the disagreement to be in the room. Again, the facilitator keeping his mouth shut and trusting that the people have the resources to move through that into something else. And 99 times out of 100, they do. Um, if people can just be given the opportunity to state where they stand and have it understood that they stand there for a reason, then the conversation completely shifts into one of it's you and me. It's a relational conversation now, right? It's not this disembodied topic conversation. And it takes on a whole different tone after that. So the disagreement may be out there, but when it's expressed between the two of us, we now have something, a different way to engage, even if we've only done it for a short period of time, that starts to change the way we see the other holding the issue. So just a quickie add on to that. When I was doing work on the Israel-Palestine, the sort of post-October 7th stuff, the focus was on how does this affect your relationships? How do the ways that this conflict has been handled, how does that affected your relationships in the workplace? And how do you want to change that? What would help change that? So there was a, a purpose that went beyond just the discussion of the issue, but to then peel back a layer and say, this is really, I can't work with people anymore. I don't want to show up. Um, because I feel like I have to hold back all the time, or I
Mm.
can't stop myself from attacking or whatever. Well, let's bring that into the conversation and make that explicit and see if there are decisions you can make and things you can do now that you've seen each other that can help you move forward together in your relationship.
Do you mean to say that while I've been in conversation with you about this issue, that there's something that I or that we uncovered that I can bring with me to the workplace?
Um, that we may have uncovered in terms of what the longing is that we have for relationship in the workplace that is being frustrated or that has been ended, that we want to return to in some way. and
Hmm.
um, and that we're feeling angry, distant, whatever, but we want to be connected in a way that's going to help us do our work, right?
Um, and how do you help people uncover the longing?
So you may or may not know that one of the foundational theories of public conversations was narrative therapy. And in narrative therapy, you're helping people to reauthor the stories they tell of themselves and others. One of the phrases that they use is the helping people find the absent but implicit. So if there's a complaint, underneath the complaint is a longing,
Yes.
right? And part
Yep.
of what we do in this structure of dialogue and conversation, both in preparatory work with people and also in the room, is to help people get underneath that to what it is they really care about, what it is they really want. And it's not like I was having a conversation yesterday with a mediation colleague, and he was talking about, yes, getting to, interests instead of positions. And I'm like, no, it goes way beyond that. We're talking about longing, in my heart, what it is to show up every day and feel alone and feel isolated when I used to feel connected and cared for. And I want that back. That's why I worked here in the first place, right? So it's, asking the right questions that enable people to do that and then creating the right environment where people are willing to say that with each other, take that chance.
Do you remember a moment when you felt so strongly? I saw you do this, like, the longing, because that you expressed, I saw your face change and the energy. Do you remember, like, where does that come from?
A long, long time ago, I had the privilege of working with the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, Frank Griswold, for about 10 years, Laura, Chasen, and I. And one time we were leading a retreat in England and of bishops and archbishops, and Frank preached a sermon, and he talked to the priests about the danger of becoming technicians of the sacred if they only paid attention to their techniques and they didn't make room for the spirit.
Mm,
And I thought that is the dilemma and the challenge that we have in this work. We can be technicians of the sacred in a certain way. We can use all the tools and techniques and have the tool belt and all that stuff. But if we don't have the heart, if we are not sort of helping people open their hearts, we're only dealing at this level. And the change that people can make is only at that level. So I am interested in a much deeper level of helping people to encounter each other because I think that's really where the lasting change can happen.
mm.
I'm preaching now.
You're pretty sounded good to me. Hmm. Well, I mean, I think you feel strongly about it, right?
I do. I feel very passionately about it. It's why I didn't and wind up being, an academic because I think that's good to a point, but I want to go past that point.
Hmm. Bob, where does that passion come from?
Couple places. Um, if I go way back, which I'm in the process of writing a book about this, uh, to my roots growing up in Buffalo, I had a lot of trauma in my life as a kid. And there was a lot I grew up without a mom. And in the 50s, um, you know, uh, that was really, it made me an outsider. Kids were not allowed to get experience from a very young age and with a lot of other trauma. But what happened along the way is that there were so many people who saw me, who, to put it in the words of James Hillman, who saw my star from the time I was 5 years old all the way through my life to this day. People who saw me, and I experienced that. I experienced being seen and welcomed, um, and asked to contribute. And so that foundational experience as a kid lived in me when I worked with people with serious mental illness and I work with people homeless. I work with people on the streets that I wanted to create the kind of experience that I had when I was a kid of being seen and appreciated. And it still, lives in me. So there's that sort of personal experience. And then the experience of doing this work where I'd been a therapist for 18 years by the time I started doing this work. And I worked in a lot of different contexts, both private practice and public work. And I had never encountered a process where people made such connections at such deep levels so quickly without shame or instruction. Um, it really was like, I suppose, some kind of equivalent of a religious conversion in a certain way. I was converted to the gospel of dialogue.
Hmm.
And I said, I remember receiving an article that Sally Ann Roth wrote, and I was working in homelessness at the time. And I must have made 50 copies of it and to send it to everybody that I knew because it was the first time that I heard anyone inviting people to talk about difference without correction or shaming. And I thought, this is the thing to pay attention to.